After the lengthy touring for There Is Nothing Left to Lose, Foo Fighters started to create demos in 2001 for a new album. However, they had to put the demos on hold after Taylor Hawkins suffered a drug overdose. While recovering, Dave Grohl joined Queens of the Stone Age and drummed on their album Songs for the Deaf. In late 2001, the band got back together to carry on composing tracks. They started to record new tracks, but after feeling the recording process started to get stale, they moved to a studio in LA for a change of scenery. $1 million and 29 recordings later, they had a collection of songs with which they all felt dissatisfied in. And for those wondering, 7 of these recordings that were later re-recorded for the final album were actually leaked recently. And yeah, these recordings are just kind of terrible. They do kind of just feel like ideas. Some songs are overly polished and others have nothing. The band completely lacked enthusiasm and the life of the songs had been completely sucked out. The tension really started to grow within the group and they found themselves constantly arguing. The band decided to discard the recordings and take a break. They did a performance at the 2002 Coachella Festival thinking it would be the final performance the band would ever do. However, after enjoying themselves so much, they decided to go back to the studio and re-record all but one of the 10 tracks for the final album. The album we got was One by One, an album that despite its re-recordings still splits the band and fans alike. Dave Grohl even said that 4 of the songs were excellent but the rest he would never play again. When going into the album, they wanted to make the darkest and heaviest album the band had done to date. He wanted to make songs that would make for energetic and exciting live performances, but he also wanted to make songs that were moody and slow. He said that the lyrics were much more personal and revealing than on the previous albums, with songs about tortured love, self-hatred and a fear of the future. Before entirely talking about the album, I do have to say you can hear a lot of the tension in these songs. The songs at times can seem quite stale and it isn't the greatest album in the band's discography. But how was the album as a whole? Well, let's look at it track by track. The first track on the album is All My Life, to date one of the band's biggest songs. Like I'd say this, Everlong and The Pretender are probably the biggest tracks the band have ever done. And I think it's incredibly overplayed and I'm sick of it. That's not to say it's a terrible song that I don't enjoy listening to it on the odd occasion, but I've heard it so many times that I just find it so unexciting now. But I'll try and talk about it unbiased and talk about it as if I've only heard it a couple times prior. This song easily has some of the best and most memorable guitar riffs the band have ever done. That opening muted G power chord has become iconic. Instrumentally, I cannot fault this song at all. It sounds great. Everybody gives a fantastic performance. The production on this track is incredible also. Everything just sounds perfect. There are many reasons why this is as popular as it is. It's a lot of fun and because of its memorable guitar riffs and incredibly catchy chorus, it's easily one of the most recognizable rock songs of the early 2000s. I'd say this and No One Knows are probably the 2 most memorable hard rock songs of 2002. On the previous album reviews, I've talked about the meaning behind the song, and for me, generally they make the songs more interesting. Looking at it from a more educated perspective can sometimes make songs better, but this one I feel is kind of better off not knowing what it's about, but I'm going to have to say it anyway. The track is about giving oral sex to women. Dave Grohl wrote the song because he's a big fan of going down on women. Not that I have a problem with writing songs about sexual acts, but for some reason knowing what the song is about makes it a little bit awkward for me. It's not like going down on a woman weirds me out or anything, but it's like before the lyrics could have meant anything. They could have had some cool meaning behind them, or they could have been just like a Fall Out Boy style meaningless song that just sounds poetic. But knowing it's about going down on a girl makes certain lyrics cringy. Like I can't listen to lyrics like I love it but I hate the taste the same anymore. But overall I think it is a good song. It's just I've heard it so many times I've gotten sick of it. The best songs are the ones you can listen to countless times and never get tired of. They're the songs that have true staying power. But All My Life isn't one of those for me. Although I may criticize the album throughout the review for very good reasons, I've always been one of the few defenders for One by One whenever people spit on it. And whenever I defend the album, Low is one of the songs I hold up as a shining example of the good things this album has on it. Low carries on the dark and heavy tone of All My Life and multiplies it by 10. This is probably the heaviest track on the album, with the down-tuned, distorted guitar riffs and their pounding tom-heavy drums blasting through the song. It's a massive in-your-face and aggressive burst of energy that is unrelenting from start to finish. There is a fantastic contrast between the instrumentation and the vocals on the song, with the instrumentation being incredibly loud and cumbersome and Dave's vocals being quite soft. Although his vocals are covered in distortion, which make even his most delicate moments fit in with the rest of the song perfectly. The guitar riff is incredibly memorable and sounds so cool. Although if there's one problem I have with it, is that it does get a little bit repetitive later on in the track. The track is, as Dave Grohl describes, about two people getting together because they realize they have more fun fucking each other than anyone else. The lyrics are very simple, but I do think they surprisingly fit the song well. Like, it just wouldn't be quite as good if there were broad, intellectual and poetic lyrics in the track. It has this grungy sound, but like pre-Super Unknown and In Utero grunge, when things were still quite simple and very hardcore punk sounding. Because of this sound, if the lyrics were deep and complicated, it just wouldn't be as good. It's just a simple, aggressive and fun hard rock song. And that's why it's one of my favorites on the album. It doesn't get stale, it doesn't get overly complicated, it's just a nice fun song that you can switch your brain off to and just lose yourself to. Why are so many of my favourite Foo Fighters songs the underrated ones? The third track, Have It All, is one I hear no one ever speak about for some reason, and I don't understand that because I think it's really good. It starts off with this cool sounding wah-wah covered riff, and then the guitars on the rest of the track sound so beautiful. It's like crunchy and overdriven, but at the same time quite clean. It's sort of reminiscent of some of the sounds from There Is Nothing Left to Lose, but with a more Strokes-esque sound. The guitars throughout the whole song sound great, including the fuzz covered lead guitar throughout also. I couldn't find any information online as to what the song was about, but from the sound of things, it sounds like a guy conflicted in a relationship. Like, he knows she is not good for him and she's incredibly toxic, but he also finds himself being drawn in and unable to leave. The track has this up-tempo groove, which makes it a lot of fun to listen to, but sadly after a while it does start to get a little bit boring. It all builds up to a cool sounding section in the outro where everything gets incredibly chaotic, but the problem is after a while the build-up gets a little bit repetitive and boring. Like, I think this song could have easily have been shortened down. While we're on that subject, this is actually an issue I have with the entire album. The majority of the songs average out between 4.5 and 5 minutes long each, and most of them don't need that. This song especially doesn't need to be the length it is. There's a section toward the end where the chorus is repeated for the third time, and I don't think it needs to be there, and that's honestly the biggest downside to the track. The rest of it's solid and a lot of fun, but it just goes on way too long. It just needed the fat trimmed off because there's a really delicious piece of meat underneath. Times Like These is probably my second favourite Foo Fighters song ever. I don't know if I said that for a different song in a previous video, but if I did, I was just wrong. This is. The track was written in the break between the original recordings of the album and the final re-recordings. It was written about the tensions in the band and Dave not feeling like himself during the situation. He sings about thinking about the band's possible breakup and feeling like he should just start over again with a clean slate, but later realizing that he needs to work on things and fix the band. It's a song about realizing that the person you've become has alienated everyone you love and that you need to make a difference and get things back to where they once were. Looking back on the past and trying to change everything to bring back those moments that once gave everything meaning. Something I think we can all relate to in some way. I think everyone feels some small bit of nostalgia and longing to recreate those moments. This song is about this feeling, and that's what I think makes it speak to a lot of people and me. A lot of people listen to Foo Fighters and consider them to be in the same vein of bands like AC/DC and Guns N' Roses, just making pure brainless rock music that's heavy enough to be played loudly but safe enough for your parents to enjoy. However, I think the band writes about some incredibly important and poignant moments in life. Many of their songs are about longing for things that may or may not be in your control, whether it's longing to stay in the moment you're in, or with this song, longing for the past to come back around. This album has a lot of moments of self-realization, where I think the band realized that they were letting everything get out of control and ignoring the one thing that was more important than anything, the music. And I think this shows in the amount of life and energy that's put into it. You can tell this song is incredibly important for every member of the band, and they put every bit of energy that they can. The guitarists are extremely catchy, the bass line is fantastic, and the drum work is just brilliant. I love the time signature changes in the main riff. It's so weird, but it makes the song stand out massively. Dave's voice is fantastic, with him screaming the chorus with such passion, especially later on in the track. I want to spend ages talking about this song, but I think it's a song that speaks for itself and just needs to be listened to. It's fun, catchy, and easily the highlight of the album and one of the highlights of the band's entire discography. Remember in the intro when I said this album has some tender moments? Well, Disenchanted Lullaby is one of those tender moments. And honestly, this is where the album completely loses the plot. This track is just not good. The guitar riff is decent, but the rest of the track doesn't do anything great. Let's just say there was a reason the first 4 tracks, which I heavily complimented, were the singles. Although after this point there are some decent moments, there are a lot of moments like this track which are just pure filler. Nothing more, nothing less. It doesn't stand out in any way, and after it's finished you'll probably forget you even heard it. It's incredibly repetitive, the chorus is boring, the lyrics are average at best, and it never goes anywhere. It's just this mid-tempo song that, although starts off a little bit promising with this quite spaced out sound, later just becomes uninspired and uninteresting. It's easily one of the weak points on the album. Tired of You is a weird one for me, because on the one hand I think it's pretty and sounds incredible, but at the same time I think it's a little bit boring and, like Have It All, could be a lot shorter. The track is very sparse and simple. For the most part it's just an electric guitar and vocals. At first it feels like it's going to be building up to something, but it kind of keeps the same pace throughout, which some may find boring, including me. What I think keeps it from making me fall asleep is that other guitar parts later come in, including a beautifully layered harmonized guitar section played by Brian May himself. It's honestly what makes this song anything special. The melodies are beautiful and Dave's vocals are pretty good, although I do think it would have sounded better if it hadn't been double tracked. I believe it would have been more beautiful if it were just one track, because it would have made the track more raw and simple, and the rawness and simplicity are all this track has going for it. All the guitar parts sound stunning, especially Brian May's part and the delay heavy guitar that comes in during the second verse, but the main riff does sound a hell of a lot like Francis Farmer from In Utero. Yeah, that kind of ruins things for me, because I'd much rather just listen to that song. After the second verse, you've heard all this track has to offer. It just loops itself minus the bridge, and that's the song's killer. It's one of the longest on the album, clocking in at 5 minutes and 12 seconds, and later into the song you really start to feel its length. And that's not something a song should make you do. You should justify its length all throughout, but this song isn't one that does that, sadly. It's a middle of the road song for me. There's things I like about it and things I hate about it, and because of that it ends up being one of the weakest tracks on the album. You'll be pleased to know that we've seen the worst this album has to offer now, so I can get back to defending it like I wanted to. Halo is the next track on the album, and one that is so criminally underrated that it irritates me intensely. The track is heavily inspired by power pop acts like Cheap Trick and Tom Petty, and because of that it sounds incredibly upbeat and fun, with the shakers and acoustic guitars making the song quite bouncy. The vocal melodies in the track are incredible, especially in the chorus, which I think is one of the best choruses on the album. Dave screams the chorus at the top of his voice and reaches the edges of his vocal range all throughout, especially in the bridge. The drum work is incredible, and I love the double tap snare beat in the chorus. The lyric contrasts the upbeat instrumentation well, with it being about fear of dying young and looking at people around him die. A lot of people have speculated that it's about Kurt Cobain, and I'd say it's possible that it had quite a bit of inspiration on some of the lyrics, but the track isn't completely about him. The track kind of sums up this album when it's at its best. It's beautiful, fun, yet dark and gloomy, and I cannot recommend this song enough. If it's one you've never heard, I'd definitely say give it a listen, because it's one that deserves all the love that it can get. Lonely As You is a hard one to speak about, because I think it's decent but nothing amazing. I like it, but it doesn't blow me away. There are things that I think are fantastic about the song, but they're kind of like little small things all throughout rather than the song as a whole. I love the clean intro, I love the guitar solo, I love the build up of the track later on, and I love Dave's vocals all throughout. But in many ways it's just your average Foo Fighters song. Nothing that sets it apart from anything. If you like the band, you'll probably like this song. There's not much else that I can say about it. You know how I said we'd heard the worst of the album? Well, I was right, but there are still some quite average songs on the latter part of the album. Songs that, although I think have good things about them, really are just standard Foo Fighters songs that don't really show them experimenting or doing anything interesting. Overdrive is a fast and fun power pop song. It's incredibly catchy, stupid, and brainless. The instrumentation is not bad. I love the fuzz-covered guitar riff in the intro and pre-verses, and that guitar solo is so beautiful, but it's nothing standout. Dave himself said that people would instantly be able to tell it's Foo Fighters more so than any of the other tracks on the album, and yeah, I think that's definitely right. So there's nothing much to say about it really. I wish I could talk for ages about some of the songs on the latter part of the album, but these songs don't do anything unique or different. They don't have loads to talk about like the other tracks on the album, and I can't get into the meanings behind the song or anything because there's barely anything online about them either. So apologies, but this is probably going to be the shortest of the Foo Fighters reviews. But hey, it's also one of their least memorable albums, so it's all good. What can I say about this song that I didn't just say about the two previous songs? Well, this song is heavier than those tracks and I adore the main riff of the song. The guitars sound great on this track and they're incredibly dark. In fact, the instrumentation is pretty heavy in general. It's the exact opposite of songs like Halo because the instrumentation is dark and heavy and the lyrics are quite happy and romantic. And that I think is pretty cool. Although I'd say this and the previous two tracks are filler tracks, this is my favourite of the three. The chorus is incredibly catchy and memorable, the guitar riff is fantastic, and the track is a lot of fun. Although I'd say similar to previous songs, it goes on way too long. They could have cut the bridge out completely and the track probably would have been a little bit better. Although Dave's voice sounds great, the bridge doesn't add anything at all. But it's one of the better tracks on the album in my opinion. And now we have the song Come Back, my second favourite song on the album and possibly my favourite album closer that the band have ever done. The track starts off with this incredible fuzz-heavy opening riff which reminds me a lot of Exhausted from their first album. Then the rest of the band blast their way in underneath this very tribal beat which sounds incredible. The melodies are very catchy and beautiful. But what sets this track apart from the other tracks on the album and other album closers is that I think instrumentally this is the best arranged track the band have ever done. The arrangement is just mind-blowing. It's two different tracks melded together to create this giant 8-minute opus. The first 4 minutes are fun and catchy and then out of nowhere everything cuts out to just this acoustic section which then slowly builds up to this massive blast of energy that gives me goosebumps every time I hear it. The track is exciting start to finish and never gets boring. This does exactly what the other track should do, justify its runtime. It's incredible that this 8-minute song feels completely worth its length, more so than any other track on the album, most of which are roughly half its length. The song is about Dave talking about how shitty a person he can be and laying out all his faults. The lyrics fit the dark tone well, even if they are pretty simple, but its simplicity in its words allow us to step back and actually embrace the instrumentation. Also, Dave's vocals on this track are just incredible. Some of the screams he does on this track are unbelievable. Easily the best vocal performance he does on the album. In fact, this song as a whole is almost the best on the album, but I think times like these just about beats it. But it's by far the perfect way to end the album. It doesn't go out with a whimper, it goes out with one of the biggest bangs you could ever imagine. One by One is an album that every big Foo Fighters fan seems to hate and I always try to defend, but even with that being said, there are some very good reasons why people consider this to be a low point for the band. A lot of the album does play things incredibly safe, though every album before and since this has done something interesting and different to keep it from being just an average Foo Fighters record, this one doesn't. The album is just them trying to make songs that sound like the band's signature sound displayed on their singles. vocals. It lacks the pop sheen of The Colour and the Shape or the more relaxed and soft sound of There Is Nothing Left to Lose, and because of that there are many moments that I feel just sound average. It has some great moments, but it consistently plays things by the numbers and doesn't do anything we've never heard before. When it's at its best, it creates some of the best music the band have ever done, but sadly when it's at its worst it does the complete opposite. As much as I will defend it for all the good things it brought us, I have to admit that it's definitely a very flawed album that I think kind of deserves the disapproval that it gets, and because of that I'm going to give One by One 7 out of 10. After the touring cycle for One by One ended, Dave was unsure as to what he wanted to do with the band next. He started to write some acoustic songs but was unsure about releasing them because he didn't want to do a solo record and he felt that the songs were too different for a Foo Fighters release. He also didn't want to get rid of the rock songs that the band was best known for doing. Eventually, instead of scrapping these songs, he decided instead to make a double album, one side being the signature hard rock Foo Fighters sound and the other one being the softer acoustic sound. This album was finally released 3 years after One by One and was known as In Your Honor. Hi guys, so a little quick addition to the end of the One by One review because something actually happened during the middle of editing this review. A new Foo Fighters song came out, a song called Run, so I'm just going to quickly talk about it because I'm not sure if there's going to be an album anytime soon. Hopefully I'll have all the Foo Fighters reviews actually out by the time there's a new album because they haven't announced anything, but they've released this new single, released a new music video for it and everything, and my opinion on it is I think it's actually really good. I think I've basically hinted at in some of my other videos where I briefly talked about Foo Fighters that I wasn't a huge fan of Sonic Highways, but I think this song is definitely a lot better than a lot of what we got on that album. There's still big problems with it, but I really liked Run. I thought it was really catchy, fun, it was fast. I loved the very airy opening and then it hits in with the huge, heavily distorted rock bits as well, kind of reminiscent of some of the faster tracks on Wasting Light, like White Limo, that sort of thing, with Dave screaming in the verses as well. The instrumentation all around I think is really good. There's some great riffs in there. It's very fun and fast. I really love the instrumentation for it. And there's a really cool sounding solo in there as well. I definitely wouldn't say it's one of their best solos or anything, or one of the most complex. It's quite simple compared to even some of the sort of things that were on Sonic Highways and the Saint Cecilia EP, but I thought it was definitely had some good moments in the solo. The drums are really good as well. Just all around the instrumentation is great. The only problem I have with the track as a whole is the lyrics, which completely bring it down. The first time I heard it, I was like, this is a good song, but it's not really great because the lyrics really ruin it. And over a few listens, the song has grown on me a lot more and I really like it now. But still, the lyrics on the track are just not good at all. They're just... I know Foo Fighters, especially newer Foo Fighters, their lyrics aren't really that great anymore. But this is a prime example of that, of sort of lyrics that don't really have a lot of meaning, it seems, behind it. And they're very repetitive, like the exact same lyrics are repeated over and over again, and it's just so boring throughout the track. And it's a long track as well, so it gets really repetitive, especially later on when they're still repeating those same lines for the chorus. But yeah, I'm not going to talk super in depth about it, just in case there is a new album, and or of course when there is a new album, if the tracks on there, we'll talk about the album fully. But yeah, really digging the new Foo Fighters track. I'd probably say I'd give it like a 4 out of 5, or I don't know, like an 8 out of 10, that sort of area. It's not amazing, but I still really enjoyed it, and I think if you're a fan of Foo Fighters, you'll probably like it as well. So yeah, thanks for watching the One by One review and sticking around for this little review of the new song, and hopefully the other videos will be out very soon. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you next time.